Welcome, wanderers of the shadowed vale, to another descent into the abyss of Throne of Nightmares. I am your guide through the labyrinth of the damned, your whisperer in the dark, the one who unearths the bones of history's best left buried. Tonight, as the clock strikes the witching hour and the veil between worlds thins to a gossamer thread, we gather around this flickering hearth of forgotten lore. Picture it, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, the distant howl of a wolf echoing like a lover's lament from the grave. You sit alone, perhaps in the creak of an old house, or huddled under threadbare blankets in a city that never truly sleeps, but sleep will not claim you tonight. No, for we embark on a journey into the heart of hereditary horror, a tale woven from the sinews of blood and the ink of infernal pacts. Close your eyes if you dare and let the chill seep into your marrow. Imagine a family tree not of blooming branches, but of gnarled roots twisting through the soil of hell itself. Branches that bear fruit not of gold or glory, but of madness, murder, and the slow, inexorable unraveling of the soul. This is the story of the Damnation Bloodline, a lineage cursed from the cradle of plague-ridden Europe, where ambition danced with the devil under a moon stained red with the blood of the innocent. They were not kings or conquerors in the annals of light. No, they were the architects of shadows, the weavers of webs that ensnared generations in a tapestry of torment. It begins, as all true nightmares do, in the fated summer of 1348, when the Black Death clawed its way across the continent like a scythe harvesting souls. In the fog-shrouded hamlets of what is now southern France, amid the wails of the dying and the pyres that blotted out the stars, there lived a man named Elias Damnation. Not his birth name, mind you. Oh no, that was Elias Duval, a humble apothecary whose hands once mixed salves for the fevered and poultices for the broken. But names are fragile things, easily twisted by the tongue of temptation. Elias, with his wife and 2 young sons, wasting away in a hovel that reeked of vinegar and despair, turned not to God, whose churches stood empty and echoing with accusations of divine wrath, but to the older gods, the ones that slither beneath the earth, whispering promises in the rustle of dead leaves. You can almost hear it now, can't you? The scrape of Elias's quill on yellowed parchment, the flicker of a single candle guttering in the draught from a cracked shutter. Outside, the cart wheels rumble, bearing the endless procession of the dead. Inside, Elias pores over forbidden tomes smuggled from Moorish scholars, grimoires bound in human skin, their pages alive with sigils that seem to writhe under his gaze. He chants words that taste of ash and iron, words that summon not salvation, but a bargain. And in the dead of night, when the moon hangs low like a severed head, it comes. Not with thunder or flame, but with the subtlety of fog rolling in from the sea, a presence that coils around his ankles, cold as the grave's embrace. What did Elias offer? His soul, you might think, but that's the crude poetry of lesser tales. No, Elias Damnation offered something far more exquisite, the souls of his bloodline, unborn and yet to be, a tithe of torment stretching into eternity. In exchange, immunity from the plague, wealth to drown in, and power that would echo through the veins of his descendants like a poison sweetly sipped. The entity, call it a demon, a djinn, or the shadow of forgotten pagan rites, sealed the pact with a kiss that blistered Elias's lips black. And just like that, the Duval line withered, and the Damnation Bloodline was born, baptized in the ink of infernal ink. But why does this matter to you, dear listener, in your safe, illuminated world of screens and steel? Because blood remembers. Because the damnation curse did not die with its maker. It metastasized, spreading through marriages of convenience, illicit liaisons in moonlit gardens, and the quiet inheritance of manners that creaked with the weight of unseen watchers. From the salons of Renaissance Paris to the fog-bound streets of Victorian London, the damnations walked among us. Dukes and dowagers by day, architects of atrocity by the witching hour. Whispers followed them like loyal hounds, children born with eyes like polished obsidian, servants vanishing into the cellars without a scream, and mirrors that cracked unbidden at the stroke of midnight. Tonight, We peel back the layers of this onion of oblivion, each skin slick with the tears of the damned. We will walk the halls of Chur-tu di Mahir, their ancestral seat, where the walls weep blood on anniversaries of the pact, and the chandeliers sway as if stirred by phantom breaths. We will meet the scions, the ambitious daughter who unearthed her father's diary and paid with her sanity, the son who sought to break the chain only to forge new links in the fires of forbidden love, the matriarch whose beauty masked a heart as cold as Siberian winds, dooming her lovers to fates unspoken. And through it all, the entity lingers, not a roaring beast, but a patient spider spinning its web across centuries, waiting for the fly to tire. Grip your armrests, for the air grows thicker now, laced with the metallic tang of fear. Feel the gooseflesh rise on your arms, the prickle at the base of your skull, as if unseen eyes appraise you from the corners of the room. This is no mere ghost story, no confection of campfires and marshmallows. This is the anatomy of a curse that defies time, a bloodline that stains the very river of history with its indelible hue. As we delve deeper, remember, knowledge is a double-edged blade. To know the damnations is to invite their shadow into your own lineage, to wonder if that odd birthmark on your wrist, that recurring dream of falling into abyssal depths, might be the first tendril of their grasp. So, settle into the embrace of the night. Let the world's clamor fade to a distant murmur. Pour yourself a glass of something dark and fortifying, red wine, perhaps, or whiskey neat, to steady the tremor in your hand. For in the next hour, or perhaps eternity feels apt, we will traverse the twisted genealogy of damnation. We will uncover letters yellowed with age, diaries scrawled in a hand that trembles with terror, and artifacts that hum with residual malice. And when the tale concludes, you may find yourself glancing over your shoulder, questioning the lineage etched in your own veins. Are you Duval or damnation, sinner or sinned against? The line blurs, my friends, as all lines do in the throne room of nightmares. Breathe deep now, and let the story unfurl like a shroud over your lap. We begin in the sweltering heat of that cursed summer, where the sun beat down on the thatched roofs of Languedoc like the fist of an angry god. The village of Saint Maloya, now little more than a footnote in dusty parish records, was a charnel house of despair. Bodies bloated in the streets, their skin mottled black as if kissed by the devil's own lips. Rats scurried in the gutters, their eyes gleaming with unholy glee, carriers of the miasma that choked the air with the stench of rot and regret. It was here, in a cottage on the outskirts, where the wild thyme grew unchecked and the olive trees twisted like arthritic fingers toward heaven, that Elias Damnation first felt the entity's gaze upon him. Elias was a man of middling years, his face gaunt from sleepless vigils over his family's bedside. His wife Margot lay on a pallet of straw, her breaths coming in ragged gasps that rattled like dry leaves in a gale. Their sons, little Pierre of 7 summers and Tom of 5, clung to her skirts, their eyes fever, bright, skin slick with the sweat of the dying. Elias had tried everything, the priest's feeble prayers, the herbalist's bitter draughts, even the crude surgery of a traveling barber who left leeches writhing on the floor. But God was deaf, and nature cruel. In the small hours, when the village bells tolled for the departed, Elias's mind turned to the forbidden, the books he'd inherited from a wayward uncle, a Cordoban alchemist who'd fled the Inquisition with singed robes, and a satchel of secrets. The tome was called Liber Umbrarum, the Book of Shadows, its cover embossed with a sigil that resembled a serpent devouring its tail, but with eyes. Oh, those eyes! Etched in silver thread that caught the candlelight and seemed to follow his movements. Elias had hidden it beneath the floorboards, fearing the zealots who roamed the countryside, torches high, hunting heretics. But desperation is a thief that picks the locks of caution. On the third night of Margot's delirium, as she murmured of shadows with teeth and hands that clawed from the walls, Elias unearthed the book. His fingers, stained with ink and herb residue, trembled as he turned the vellum pages, each one crackling like the voice of the damned. The ritual was simple, deceptively so. a circle of salt and sulphur on the packed earth floor, a chant in a tongue that twisted the tongue like thorns. Azrael, watcher of the threshold, I summon thee not in wrath, but in want. Lend thy breath to the fading, thy gold to the barren, thy shadow to the seeker. The words tasted foreign, acrid, like swallowing smoke from a funeral pyre. As he spoke, the candle flame leaped high, casting elongated shadows that danced like courtiers at a mad king's ball. The air grew thick, oppressive, as if the room itself held its breath, and then a whisper, not from the book, but from the corners, from the cracks in the mortar, from the very folds of his soul. It was no thunderous apparition, no cloven, hoofed horror of church frescoes. Instead, a figure coalesced from the gloom, tall and androgynous, cloaked in mist that swirled like living smoke, its face a mask of porcelain pale, eyes like twin voids sucking in the light. What price? Mortal. It breathed, its voice a silken rasp that sent shivers cascading down Elias's spine. He stammered his plea, the plague's retreat, prosperity for his house, legacy for his seed. The entity tilted its head, a gesture almost avian curious. Blood calls to blood. It murmured, give me the chain unbroken, the river of your vein flowing into the abyss. Firstborn to last, each a vessel for my vigil. In return, the pestilence parts and fortune floods your door. Elias hesitated, the weight of eternity pressing on his chest like a millstone. He thought of Margot's laughter in better days, of Pierre's gap-toothed grin as he chased fireflies, of Tom's tiny hand in his. But the entity's gaze bored into him, promising not just survival, but dominion. With a sob that tore from his throat like a blade, he nodded. The pact was sealed not with blood. Too vulgar, but with a breath, the entity leaned close, its lips brushing his, exhaling a cold vapor that filled his lungs with the scent of brimstone and blooming nightshade. Elias gasped, and in that moment, the fever broke. Margot's color returned with the dawn. The boys rose laughing, demanding bread and stories. The village marveled as the Duvals endured while neighbors crumbled. But names, as I said, are fragile. Elias burned his old ledgers, rechristened his family in the dead of night by the light of that same candle. Damnation. They who are condemned, they who damn. Word spread of their miracle, and with it came opportunity. Elias's herbs, now infused with an uncanny potency, cured the lingering afflicted. Nobles from distant courts sent couriers with purses heavy with coin. By autumn, the cottage was forsaken for a stone manor on the hill, its vineyards heavy with grapes that burst sweeter than sin. Elias's coffers overflowed, merchants bowed low, whispering of his divine touch. Yet the first cracks appeared subtly like fissures in fine porcelain. Pierre, the elder son, began to sleepwalk, murmuring in that same ancient tongue Elias had banished to memory. One night Elias found him at the edge of the forest, arms outstretched to the moon, his small chest heaving as if in communion with something vast and hungry. Thom, ever the shadow to his brother, took to drawing on the walls, crude sigils that matched those in the Liberumberum, smeared in berry juice that stained like blood. Margot, revived but altered, her eyes holding a distant glaze, would hum lullabies with melodies that curdled the milk in the pans. Elias buried the book deeper in a lead-lined chest beneath the manor's altar like hearth. He told himself it was done, the price deferred to some foggy hereafter. But the entity had not vanished, it lingered in the periphery. A chill draft in sunlit rooms, a reflection that lagged a heartbeat behind in polished silver. Dreams plagued him, visions of his descendants, faces contorted in ecstasy and agony, offering teethers of flesh and fervor to the void. He awoke sweating, the taste of ash on his tongue, vowing silence. Years turned like pages in a grim ledger. The damnations prospered. Elias sired more children, a daughter Isolde, born under a comet's baleful streak, her cry echoing like a banshee's wail. The family expanded, acquiring lands that bordered the ancient forests where druids once whispered to oaks older than Christ. By the time the plague's shadow receded, Elias was lord of his domain, his name synonymous with salvation. But salvation, my shadowed listeners, is but damnation's prettier sister. It was in 1362, during a harvest feast awash in wine and wanton revelry, that the entity's first demand ripened. Pierre, now a strapping youth of 21, had fallen into the arms of a village maiden named Clara, blonde as summer wheat, with laughter like bells. Their union was passion's fire, but on their wedding eve, as the manor blazed with torches and the air thrummed with lutes, Pierre vanished. Searchers combed the vineyards, the cellars stocked with casks that gurgled like throats in thirst. Dawn broke with his body discovered at the forest's edge, throat torn as if by wolves, but no tracks marred the dew-kissed earth. In his clenched fist, a scrap of parchment, the sigil, burned into his palm. Elias knew the tithe had begun. He wept not for the boy, but for the chain's inexorable pull. Margaret, sensing the fracture, took to her bed, whispering of shadows that now wore their son's face. Thom, hardened young, stepped into the void, his eyes gleaming with a fervor that mirrored his father's hidden hunger. Isolde, barely flowered into womanhood, watched it all with an unnerving calm, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the tablecloths. The village mourned, but whispers turned to accusations. Witchcraft, they hissed, for how else to explain the damnation's unscathed rise? Elias quelled them with gold and gifts, but the seed of suspicion took root, sprouting thorns that would pierce deeper in centuries to come. He commissioned a portrait of Pierre, its eyes following the viewer like accusatory spectres, and hung it in the great hall as both tribute and warning. As the decades unfurled, Elias's empire grew. He married Isolde to a minor noble, birthing a new branch of the bloodline, children with hair black as raven wings and tempers that flared like hellfire. Thom wed a merchant's daughter, their union yielding heirs who navigated courts with tongues sharp as daggers. The Chateau de Malheur rose from the hillside, its spires piercing the sky like accusatory fingers, gargoyles leering from cornices with mouths frozen in eternal screams. Within, tapestries depicted not biblical triumphs, but alchemical triumphs. The philosopher's stone forged in crucibles of bone, but the entity demanded more. Servants vanished. First the scullery maid who glimpsed Elias chanting in the chapel at midnight, then the groom who swore the horses shied from Tom's shadow. Each loss was chalked to bandits or beasts, but Elias found the sigils etched in the rafters, the air humming with residual power. Margaret, unraveling thread by thread, took her own life one All Hallows Eve, hanging from the chandelier in the master chamber, her toes brushing the Persian rug stained with wine from the feast below. In her suicide note, scrawled in blood D, the river flows, and we are its drowned. Elias Damnation lived to see his 60th year, a patriarch wreathed in wealth but hollowed by horror. On his deathbed, surrounded by grandchildren whose laughter rang false, he confessed fragments to Tom the Pact, the price, the perpetual peril. Break it if you can, he rasped, his breath reeking of sulphur. But no, the web binds tighter with each tug. Tom nodded, his face a mask of filial piety, but in his heart ambition stirred, a desire not to sever, but to master the chain. And so, the first part of our chronicle closes on a note of uneasy truce. The Damnation Bloodline, forged in the crucible of catastrophe, spreads its roots deeper into the soil of Europe. Fortunes amass, alliances forge, but the shadow lengthens. Listeners, do you feel it? The prickle of eyes upon you, the whisper of silk against stone. The entity's vigil has only just begun, and with it, the true unraveling of souls, unfurling like the petals of a night, blooming serious, toxic, and irresistible. Thom Damnation, now master of the chair, too, after Elias's quiet interment in the family crypt. A vault hewn from the hillside, its iron doors engraved with wards that glowed faintly under moonlight, wasted no time in consolidating the legacy. He was a man of 35, broad-shouldered and dark-browed, with a smile that disarmed rivals and a gaze that stripped secrets bare. Where Elias had been a reluctant sorcerer, Tom embraced the arcane with the fervor of a convert. He delved into the Liber Umbrum, poring over its pages in the dead of night, the chamber lit by foxfire lanterns that cast verdant glows on walls papered in velvet of the color of congealed blood. The entity, ever the subtle suitor, rewarded his curiosity. Whispers became dialogues, delivered in dreams where Tom walked gardens of black roses under skies stitched with lightning. The pact is a loom. It intuned, its form shifting from mist to man to multiplicity, faces overlapping like reflections in shattered glass. Weave wisely, and the cloth adorns empires. Fumble, and it strangles. Tom learned arts forbidden to mortals, elixirs that bent wills like reeds in wind, talismans that revealed hidden veins of gold in barren earth. Under his hand, the damnation holdings ballooned, vineyards yielding vintages that induced visions of ecstasy, mines unearthed by divinations that spat forth silver like dragons' teeth. But the tithe exacted its toll with increasing veracity. Isolde's husband, the Baron de Vire, perished in a hunting accident, his horse bolting into the forest, impaling him on antlers that left no trace of beast. Isolde, widowed at 28, returned to the Chateau with her daughter Elara, a child of 6 whose precocity chilled the marrow. Elara spoke in riddles, her tiny voice echoing with cadences not her own. The river hungers. Mama, when shall we feed it? Isolde, her beauty sharpened to a blade's edge by grief, drowned her sorrows in absinthe laced with nightshade, her nights filled with fevered trysts, with phantom lovers who left bruises like lovers' knots. Tom's own marriage frayed under the strain. His wife, Beatrice, a pious soul from a Genoese trading family, bore him 3 sons, Gideon, the heir Lucian, the scholar, and Remy, the wild one. But Beatrice sensed the darkness coiling in the manor's bones. She found sigils scratched into the nursery cradle, heard the entities hiss in the hearth's crackle. Her piety turned to paranoia. She clutched rosaries that blistered her palms, muttering exorcisms that only amused the shadows. One Lammas night, as the harvest moon bloated the sky, Beatrice confronted Tom in the library, the air thick with the scent of old leather and ozone. "What devilry have you wrought, husband? Our son's dreams are plagued by wolves with your face." Tom's response was measured, his hand gentle on her wrist. Too gentle, infused with the subtle compulsion of his elixirs. "Hush, my love! The world is full of wolves, we merely pen them." But Beatrice pulled away, her eyes wild. That eve, she fled the chateau with a satchel of jewels and a crucifix clutched like a dagger. Servants later whispered of her screams, echoing from the battlements, of a silhouette plummeting into the ravine below, her body twisted among the rocks like a discarded puppet. The inquest ruled suicide, swayed by Tom's gold and Gideon's precocious testimony. Mama flew to the angels, Papa says. Gideon, at 10, was the entity's favorite plaything. Tall for his age, with hair like polished jet and eyes that held storms, he manifested gifts early, visions that foretold bountiful rains or rival bankruptcies, hands that healed a falcon's broken wing with a touch that left feathers singed. Tom groomed him as successor, teaching him the chants in hushed tones by the crypt's glow where Elias's sarcophagus wept condensation like tears. But the boy hungered for more than lore, he craved the entity's favor directly. At 12, during a solstice rite in the forest glade, circle of standing stones older than Rome, carpeted in moss that pulsed like veins, Gideon offered a tribute unbidden, the family cat, its throat slit with a silver athame, blood pooling to form the sigil in the earth. The entity materialized in a whirlwind of leaves and embers, its form coalescing into a youth mirroring Gideon, beautiful, androgynous, with lips curved in mocking delight. Bold fledgling, it purred, trailing fingers that left trails of frost on the boy's skin. "The river accepts your libation. What boon do you seek?" Gideon, heart pounding like war drums, demanded knowledge, the secrets of immortality, of bending kings to knee. The entity laughed, a sound like shattering crystal, and granted a vision. Elixir's recipe, forged from mercury mandrake, and the essence of the willing. But as the rite closed, Gideon's shadow detached, lingering on the stones, a dark twin that followed him home. From thence the hauntings intensified. Lucian, the middle son, scholarly and slight, took to the library's forbidden stacks, uncovering Elias's diaries. Tums bound in calfskin, pages dense with frantic script. There he read of the pact's fine print. Each generation must yield a soul willingly, or the entity would claim all in a cataclysm of blood. Lucien's nights became vigils, poring over counter rites from rival grimoires, his candle stubs piling like accusations. Remy, the youngest, rebelled in fleshly ways, haunting the village taverns, bedding daughters of yeomen with abandon, his conquests marked by sigils carved in ecstasy on fevered skin. Yet even Remy's debauchery served the curse. His paramours birthed bastards who carried the bloodline's taint, diluted but dormant, waiting to bloom. The Château too itself awakened, as if the stones absorbed the malice like a sponge. Doors slammed unbidden, sealing rooms where echoes of Beatrice's cries lingered. Chandeliers tinkled without wind, crystals chiming dirges that woke babes to wails. In the kitchens, pots boiled over with broth that tasted of copper, and the wine cellars' casks birthed vermin with eyes like garnets. Elara, now a maiden of 16, flowered into a beauty that ensnared suitors like flies in amber. Poets from Provence, knights from the north. But each who pressed his suit vanished. One drowned in the estate's lily pond, weeds woven into his hair like a crown of thorns. Another gored by a boar during a hunt, its tusks etched with the sigil post-mortem. Isolde, unraveling into opium haze, confessed to Tom one twilight in the rose arbor, thorns dripping petals like blood droplets. The shadow courts her brother. It whispers of unions beyond flesh, of blood mingling with the void. Tom, ever the pragmatist, arranged Elara's betrothal to a duke's son, Armand de Montfort, a union to cement alliances amid the wars of religion brewing. The wedding was splendor incarnate, halls draped in damask, tables groaning under pheasant and figs, minstrels weaving melodies that masked the entity's hum. But as vows were exchanged under the chapel's vaulted gloom, where stained glass depicted saints with faces contorted in agony, Elara faltered. Her eyes rolled back, voice issuing not her own. The river claims its due. Join us or be joined. Armand laughed it off as bridal nerves. But that nuptial night screams rent the air. Servants burst into the bridal chamber to find Armand crucified on the four-poster, wrists and ankles bound with bedsheets twisted into ropes, his chest carved with the sigil, blood scripting verses in an eldritch script. Elara stood unscathed, gown immaculate, a serene smile on lips stained with wine or something darker. Thumb sealed the chamber, branding it cursed, and shipped Elara to a convent in the Pyrenees, walls of cold stone, vows of silence to muzzle the madness. But letters smuggled out spoke of visitations, a figure slipping through bars like smoke, leaving Elara with belly swelling and mind fracturing. Meanwhile, Gideon's shadow twin grew bolder. It mimicked him in mirrors, mouthing words he dared not utter. It trailed him to council meetings, where advisors shivered and crossed themselves. Thom confronted his son in the crypt, the air fetid with earth and incense. Master it, boy, or it masters you. Gideon, defiant, revealed his experiments, the elixir brewed in the alchemist's tower, a spire piercing the fog like a needle to heaven. Sipped under eclipse, it granted visions futures where the damnations ruled from thrones of bone. Pasts where Elias's pact was but one thread in a vast tapestry of pacts spanning antiquity. The conflicts crested in 1492, as Columbus's sails furled on distant shores and Europe teetered on Reformation's brink. Thom, graying but unbowed, summoned the entity in the grand rite, the glade ringed by torches, family arrayed in robes of midnight silk. Lucien chanted wards of protection, Remy scattered salt in defiant arcs, but Gideon stepped forward, offering not tribute, but challenge. Show us the loom's full weave, or be unraveled. The entity manifested in fury, a tempest of claws and cries, form fracturing into multiplicity. Lightning cracked the central stone, winds howled ancestors' names. In the chaos, Remy was claimed, torn into the earth, swallowed by roots that burst forth like serpents, his final scream a gurgle of soil and blood. The family reeled. Lucien fled to scholarly exile in Basel, burying himself in printing presses that spat treatises on demonology. Isolde followed, succumbing to the pipe's embrace in a garret overlooking the Rhine. Thom, broken, deeded the estate to Gideon, retiring to a tower cell where he scratched prophecies on walls with his nails. Gideon, now sole scion, married a witch from the Black Forest, Lilith, with hair like spun midnight and arts that rivaled his own. Their union birthed twins, boys with eyes of void who cooed in tongues of flame. Yet the hauntings persisted, layered now with the weight of betrayal. The entity's whispers evolved into cacophonies, choirs of the tithed, pleading and promising. Servants mutinied torches high, but Gideon's elixirs turned their rage to rapture, binding them in ecstatic servitude. Elora escaped the convent, birthing a daughter in a roadside inn, the child marked with a birthmark like the sigil on her breast. She returned to the Shire too, a spectre in rags demanding her place. The reunion was a maelstrom of recriminations, accusations of favoritism, prophecies of doom. Lilith, jealous, slipped mandrake into Elara's wine, but the draught only amplified her visions. Revelations of the entity's true name, a syllable that shattered goblets when uttered. As the century waned, the Inquisition's shadow loomed. Inquisitors, tipped by Lucien's anonymous pamphlets, encircled the Shire too. Gideon bartered secrets for silence, alchemical formulae that armed kings against foes. But the cost mounted, a grandchild lost to fever that burned sigils into flesh, a library inferno that spared only the Liber Umbrarum, floating unscathed on updrafts of malice. The bloodline splintered, branches fleeing to England, to the New World, carrying the curse in their veins like contraband spice, and so Part 2 draws to a fevered close, the damnations not diminished, but disseminated, their sins seeding soils afar. The entity, patient as erosion, waits in the blood's quiet current. Feel the pulse in your temples, listeners. The story's vein throbs, urging us onward into the annals of authenticity, where fact and fable entwine like lovers in the grave, where the threads of the damnation tale weave into the broader loom of Europe's shadowed tapestry. A weave rich with the warp of plague, the weft of persecution, and the dyes bled from the wounds of forbidden faith. To grasp the damnation's sinister ascent, we must excavate not just their private perdition, but the public pyres that lit the continent's night. Step with me now from the Shaytu's cloistered gloom into the broader channel of history, where folklore and fact blur like ink in rain, creating an authenticity that unsettles the soul. Foremost looms the Black Death, that apocalyptic scourge of 1347-1351, which claimed perhaps 60% of Europe's populace, 25 million souls harvested in a mere 4 years. Contemporary chroniclers, like the Italian Giovanni Boccaccio in his Decameron, painted vivid horrors. The virulence of the pestilence was such that the ill appeared to be suffocating in their own skin. Cities became ossuaries. Florence's streets, once alive with merchants' cries, echoed only with the Ars Moriendi dirge, the dance of death, immortalized in woodcuts where skeletal reapers jigged amid nobles and peasants alike. It was an era when the air itself seemed poisoned, miasmas rising from bad air that physicians combated with beak-masked helms stuffed with herbs, rosemary ambergris, the very thyme that carpeted St. Maloya's hills. In this cauldron of catastrophe, the ground was fertile for the damnation's infernal seed. Medieval Europe, gripped by flagellant processions, bands of self-lacerating penitents whipping flesh to appease a wrathful god, turned to extremes. Apothecaries like Elias were both saviors and suspects, their compounds, drawn from Galenic humors and Arabic texts, smuggled via Toledo's translation schools, blurred into sorcery. The Liber Umbrarum echoes real grimoires, the Pecatrix, a 13th-century Arab astrological manual blending Neoplatonism with talismanic magic, or the Sworn Book of Honorius, attributed to a 14th-century monk, detailing spirit summonings with circles of protection that mirror Elias's rite. These were not fantasies, they circulated in monastic scriptoria, copied by trembling hands under candlelight, their possession a spark for inquisitorial tinder. The Pact's motif, ubiquitous in folklore, from Faust's legendary bargain, crystallized in Goethe's 1808 drama but rooted in 16th-century printing of the 1587 Historia von D. Johann Forsten, to the Breton Anko, a skeletal death figure who claimed souls for the other world, in exchange for boons. In Languedoc, Cathar heresies lingered like ghosts, these dualist believers, decimated in the 13th-century Albigensian crusade, viewed the material world as Satan's snare, their consolamentum write a spiritual pact, echoing the damnation's tithe. Elias's entity, that misty manipulator, evokes the daemon of classical lore, Socrates' guiding spirit, twisted Christian into demon, or the familiar of witch trials, a shape-shifting alley demanding milk or blood. As the bloodline burgeoned into the Renaissance, cultural currents carried them on tides of humanism laced with hubris. The 15th century's alchemical renaissance, fueled by figures like Paracelsus 1493–1540 Winden, who proclaimed, "The universe is the work of the devil," provided cover for Tom's elixirs. Paracelsus's Archidoxis Magica detailed spagyrics, distillations of plant and mineral essences that paralleled the essence of the willing, blurring medicine and maleficium. The Damnation's Vineyards, a nod to the wine trade's boom, Bordeaux and Burgundy estates amassing fortunes amid 100 Years' War skirmishes, 1337 War 253, where noble houses like the Montforts, real Armagnac lords, forged alliances through shotgun weddings. Yet peril shadowed prosperity. The Inquisition, formalized by Pope Gregory Ix's 1231 bull Excommunicamus, evolved into a hydra by the 15th century. In France, the Chamber Ardent trials of 1579–1582 under Henry III burned poisoners and sorcerers. Their methods, torture via strappado or waterboarding, mirroring the Inquisitors' siege on Chateau de Mahua. Witch hunts peaked in the 16th–17th centuries, the Malleus Maleficarums of 1486, by Heinrich Kramer codifying accusations, pacts with devils, maleficia causing impotence or livestock blight, marks like Elara's sigil birthmark. Over 40,000 executions per modern estimates, many women like Isolde or Beatrice, whose hysteria masked patriarchal curses. Folklore amplifies the eeriness. In Provence, the Low Piebre, werewolf legends, recall Pierre's sleepwalking, beast summoned by lunar pull, as in 1521's trial of the Gandillan family, hanged for lupine murders. Elara's bridal horror evokes Droit du Seigneur twisted dark, or the Maime Luzin fairy, serpentine seductress of Lusignan lords, a real 14th century houst, whose curse-doomed husbands who spied her bathing. The entity's multiplicity, shades of the wild hunt, Germanic processions led by Odin or Herne, harbingers claiming the unwary, chronicled in 12th century Welsh Mabinogion. Venturing to the New World branch, Lucian's scholarly flight presaging emigration, the cursed transplants, 17th century Salem, 1692 witch trials, with spectral evidence and afflicted girls like Elara, hanged 24, familiars, and pacts. Damnation scions might lurk in Carolina plantations, their elixirs fueling slave rebellions or yellow fever epidemics. 1793 Philadelphia claimed 5,000 sigils etched in voodoo vives, blending African lore with European demonology. Cultural trauma here. The transatlantic slave trade, 12 million Africans, 1500–1866, as a mega-pact, fortunes built on blood tithers, echoing the family's infernal ledger. In Britain, Gideon's twins evoked the gunpowder plots, 1605. Catholic conspirators like Robert Catesby, real alchemist dabbler, plotting infernal booms. Victorian London, fog-choked, hosts the Bloodline's urban haunt, Jack the Ripper's 1888 eviscerations mirroring Armand's carving, amid spiritualism's rage, seances by the Fox sisters, 1848 mediums channeling entities that possess, like Gideon's shadow. The Liber Umbrarum finds kin in the Golden Dawn's 1888 founding, Aleister Crowley's Book of the Laws 1904, channeling Iwas, a voice demanding, "Do what thou wilt," Tom's ethos incarnate. Educational yet eerie, these contexts authenticate the fiction, suggesting the Damnations as archetype, not anomaly. Real bloodlines like the Borgias, 15th century poisoned rivals with Cantarella, their papal intrigues a secular pact. The Rothschilds, 18th century bankers, spawned anti-Semitic myths of Jewish cabals. Controlling fate, a folkloric damnation. Universal, the taboo of inheritance, from Greek Pharmacon's poison cure to Freud's totem and taboo 19 Verthede, where patricidal guilt curses clans. Unsettling authenticity blooms in artifacts, the Voynich manuscript, the 15th century undeciphered herbal arcane, akin to Elias's tome, or the 1531 Basil witch's execution woodcut, screams frozen in ink. Legends persist, Cornish piskies luring souls, Romanian strigoi bloodlines vampiric. The Damnations embody this, a microcosm of humanity's dance with the dark, where survival's price is the soul's slow erosion. As we emerge from this historical fog, feel the chill. The past's fingers brush your now, whispering that curses are cultural, etched in collective trauma. The river flows on, carrying us to analysis's depths, where symbols surface like drowned faces where the damnation narrative transcends chronicle, plunging into the psychological abyss, a mirror held to the fractured human psyche. Here, in the throne room's shadowed alcove, we dissect not just events, but their echoes, the symbolic serpents that coil through the collective unconscious, binding universal fears to the bloodline's visceral curse. Our tone remains ominous, intellectual, as if lecturing by lightning's flicker, each insight a scalpel parting flesh to reveal the writhing beneath. At core, the Damnation Pact symbolizes the Faustian bargain writ familial, not individual hubris, but generational avarice, where ambition's apple is bitten not once, but inherited, its worm burrowing deeper with each more. Elias's choice, survival over sanctity, mirrors Jungian-shadow integration, the repressed dark self erupting in progeny. Pierre's sleepwalking, Gideon's detached umbra, these are Doppelganger motifs, harbingers of dissolution, as in Poe's William Wilson, c. 1839, where the double enacts the forbidden, dooming the original. Psychologically, they embody dissociation, the soul's fracture under trauma's weight, the Black Death as collective PTSD, manifesting in scapegoating witches, as per Elaine Pagels's The Origin of Satan 1995, where evil is projected outward to preserve the self. Thematically, the bloodline probes hereditary sin, a concept Augustinian, original sin as DNA deep damnation, each birth a reenactment of Eden's fall. The entity's tithe evokes Leviticus's Corban, sacrificial offerings to appease the divine, twisted, profane here, the willing. Soul is coerced by legacy, a meme of Malice per Dawkins, propagating via whispers and sigils. Universal fear, the taboo of filiation. Froude's Oedipal residue, where parents' shadows eclipse children. Elara's spectral pregnancy as womb, haunted inheritance. Lilith's jealousy, the devouring mother archetype from Newman's The Great Mother, 1955. Culturally, it connects to trauma transmission. Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, 2014, illuminating how epigenetics imprints horror. Plague survivors' descendants, like damnations, bearing hypervigilance in veins. The Ch2 as liminal space, Baccalad's The Poetics of Space, 1958, a womb tum where domesticity devolves to dungeon, mirrors Gothic tropes, Walpole's Castle of Otranto, 1764, ancestral crimes bleeding through stones. Chillingly real poltergeists cluster in dysfunctional homes, Pergaud and Cornell's Poltergeists, 1979, the damnation manner a poltergeist of pact, objects animating with repressed rage. Psychologically, the entity is autonomous complex, per Jung, a splinter psyche demanding autonomy, manifesting as possession in the varieties of religious experience, 1902 by James. Its androgyny. Anima, animus projection, the unlived gender devouring the conscious. Isolde's opium visions, Beatrice's pious flight as failed integrations. Human nature's underbelly, Thanatos' drive, Freud's death instinct, the river as Styxian flow toward entropy, each tie the micro, suicide, palliating existential dread. Symbolically, sigils are mandalas inverted. Jungian wholeness corrupted to binding, alchemy's opus contra naturam yielding not gold but gall, the forest glade. Mundus imaginalis Corbin's intermediary realm where pact seals, druidic echoes in Fraser's The Golden Buff c. 1890, sacred groves as portals. Universal fears coalesce memento mori, death's inevitability, the bloodline a memento damnationis, reminding mortality's market price. Ominously it queries modernity in gene editing's Quirespiar era, are we liars, bargaining with helix demons for immortality. Climate cataclysms echo plague. Pacts with tech, gods for survival, tithers in privacy or planet. The damnation's worn progress is packed, each boon a boot on the soul's throat. Intellectually, it haunts Viraporia, the breakable chains paradox, Zeno's arrow eternally approaching doom, thematic nexus hubris as human hallmark, Aeschylus's Prometheus bound, fire stolen but liver eternal, the bloodline's diaspora colonial curses, Spivak's Can the Subaltern Speak, so 1988 silenced voices in New World veins. In this analysis, the tale's chill deepens, not escapable fiction, but fractal of frailty. We are all damnations, veins veined with voids, waiting for the whisper. As symbols subside, the conclusion calls, a lingering knell, a knell that reverberates through the chambers of your mind long after the candle gutters, leaving you adrift in the after-echo of the damnation dirge. We have traversed the fog-bound origins, the Cheatu's creaking corridors of conflict, the historical catacombs where fact feeds the phantom, and the psychological undercroft where symbols slither like eels in the Ides murk. Now, as the first grey tendrils of dawn claw at your windows, or is it dusk's deepening? Time phrase in such tellings? We draw the shroud tight, summarizing not with closure, but with the chill precision of a crypt door ceiling. The damnation bloodline, a serpent uncoiling from plague's egg, its scales iridescent with the sheen of forbidden fortune. Elias's quill stroke birthed it, a pack penned in the sweat of survival, promising empires but delivering only the exquisite agony of anticipation. Thom wove the web tighter, his alchemical ambitions ensnaring sons and spouses in threads of tithe. Pierre's forest feast, Beatrice's plummeting piety, Remy's earthen embrace. Gideon, that bold fledgling, danced on the precipice, his shadow twin a harbinger of the hubris that hollows. Alara and I sold the women's weave, embodied the curse's feminine face. Seduction as snare, maternity as malediction, their wums way stations for the void's voyage. Branches splintered across seas and centuries, seeding shadows in Salem's gallows, London's fog, the America's amber waves, each diaspora delusion that deceives, for blood remembers, blood returns. What lingers? The entity's patient purr, that misty manipulator whose form shifts but whose hunger is constant. A reminder that power's price is perpetuity, the soul's slow surrender. The church, too, stands yet, in ruins now, they say, vines reclaiming spires, gargoyles eroded to grins, tourists snapping selfies oblivious to the hum beneath the stones. But you, enlightened listener, feel it the prickle of sigils on your skin, the whisper in your veins urging, what would you offer? For the damnations teach that curses are choices compounded, sins synaptic, firing across generations like ghosts in the machine of meat. Haunted are you? Good. Let this tale cling like grave mold to your coattails, trailing you into dreams where rivers run backward, carrying faces upstream, yours among them, perhaps etched with the question, is the pact broken or merely paused, awaiting your unwitting utterance? As the music fades to silences more, and the screen dissolves to black, remember in the throne of nightmares, no crown is unbloodied, no scepter unspiked. Sleep lightly, wanderers. The entity watches, the blood calls, and the damnation endures,